Okay, today is September the 7th, 2023. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And today I am in Edmond, Oklahoma to speak with Jan Jewell, a longtime supporter of OSU and an OSU alum, a 2009 master's degree in teaching, learning, and leadership. Mm-hmm. This interview will be part of the Stories from Oklahoma State University, and we'll specifically focus on Pete's Pet Posse, or P3 for short. Mm-hmm. By way of context, OSU's pet therapy program was established in 2013 as part of the university's commitment to being America's healthiest campus and is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. P3 supports emotional wellness of students, staff, and faculty, and has now grown beyond the OSU Stillwater campus. It takes a team to get such an initiative off the ground, and Jan and her dog Bella, this is not Bella, but Bella were part of the first class of P3 dogs back in 2013. This is Shelby.
This is Shelby.
Okay. All right. With that said, thank you for letting me come to your home today.
Sure.
Let's begin with learning a little bit about you. Start wherever you like.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start with when I came to OSU.
Okay.
I came back I graduated in 1971, and I visited both OSU and OU's campus, but I found OSU's campus just absolutely fit my personality. It was just so much more open and so much friendlier. The people, when you walked around campus, greeted you and spoke to you, and it was a beautiful campus, and I just knew that it was home, so that's where I wanted to be. And I lived in Willard Hall.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful place to live. Actually, it was not air conditioned at the time.
Okay.
But I lived in my roommate and I had a corner room, and we had a fan that, as I look back, the warm months didn't last all that long as a student, because you come, kind of close to the 1st of September, and then you're out in May, so there weren't a lot of hot days, and we opened, because we were a corner room, we could open 2 windows and keep the fan going. And plus, in Willard, the ceilings are very tall, mm-hmm. and as they were in those older buildings, and so it stayed pretty cool in there. And in the winter, we also kept the windows open because we put electric blankets on our beds, and we just loved it to be really, really cold in there. And we'd go jump in our beds with the electric blankets on, and of course everybody else on the floor would complain when they came into our rooms and said it was cold enough to hang meat in that room. But it was a great experience living in Willard. I made really good friends there that I'm still friends with to this day, and it was a great location on campus as well. So I had a wonderful experience there.
I'm thinking in 71, was that kind of during where the panty raids were happening, or was that after your time?
I think that was right maybe before, and a lot of those I think happened in more the sorority houses and stuff than they did the dorms. But but we did we had powder puff football that and I played the center, and the guys from the dorms across the street, they were our coaches. They weren't allowed to play, but they coached us. And so my big play was the center sneak, which it'd be cool if they could do it now, but I don't think it's where you start to act like you're going to hike the ball, but instead you just grab it and run down the field. And it'd be wonderful if they could do that now, but it was pretty much everything was allowed for powder puff, so it was fun.
Where would you play those?
Well, behind Willard, there's all that grassy area between Willard and Theta Pond.
Okay.
So we played right behind.
Right there.
Yeah, and I loved sitting out on the back porch at Willard and just looking out on the pond. I mean, I felt like I was in an old Southern plantation somewhere. It was. I did that, almost every day. I'd sit out there and read. And so if I had to study, a lot of times I'd just take my book out on the porch and read out there.
Did you know your roommate before you went?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. We went to East Central High School together, and then my second year, we both picked different roommates. I mean, we got along fine, but we enjoyed everybody up and down the hall so much, we just switched, and two other people that we enjoyed in the hall, we roomed with them, and my roommate came from Tipton, Oklahoma, and I really enjoyed her. She had the cutest Southern accent ever, and I ended up singing at her wedding, and she and I are still friends to this day, and I'm still friends with my first roommate and her roommate as well. So it's been nice to be able to keep track with everybody.
How often do you get to see them?
I've seen them several times, and in fact, because my husband worked for the foundation, we went to all the football games, and so a year or two ago, I was able to host about 8 of them, and they all came up to the foundation suite for the football game, and so that was really great. And some of them hadn't been back to football games in a while, so that was real fun for them. Because one of them, my roommate, my first roommate, she lives in Fort Collins, Colorado now, so that was really fun for her to come back and come to a football game.
Did Willard have a cafeteria in it?
It did. We had a cafeteria in the basement.
In the basement.
And the guys across the street would come over and eat with us in our basement.
So Murray, is that who?
Murray,
across. Well, we don't call it that anymore.
No.
But Murray, okay. And so this was an old-timey dorm where you had to go down the hall to the bathroom.
You did.
And shower or whatever.
Yeah. The showers and the bathrooms were down the hall, and that wasn't always fun, but
Hey.
we didn't know any different back then. We didn't have those great dorms that they have now, where you've got the bathroom, the shower right in your little pod. So.
And what about the phone?
The phone was on. Let's see. I can't remember. I didn't have a cell phone in the 70s, so.
In each room, I'm sure didn't.
I think it was on the wall.
Each
in the
floor
hallway.
had one.
Yeah, I think we had to go and use the one on the that was mounted on the wall.
Did you have dances?
I don't remember dances. We had a talent show. We had just some parties and things like that, and we had the thing I remember the most is the candle lights, and so if anybody got engaged, if anyone got engaged, then everybody would meet, real late at night and sit in the floor of the hall, pass a candle around and sing this little song, and most of the people wouldn't know necessarily who it was that had gotten engaged. And when the candle, when it got to the end of the song and the candle got around to the person who was engaged, she would blow it out, and everybody would scream and holler and have a big fit, and it was fun.
Sounds really fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
So would you have they wouldn't have those until you knew somebody was engaged?
Yeah.
So somebody would have to know.
Well, she would tell the resident assistant, and
Okay.
the resident assistant would put up a sign that would say "Candlelight Tonight."
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
What was your major?
My major, I started off as a theater major, and I had planned that I was going to graduate, and then I was going to go to New York and be on Broadway. But but my first semester, I ended up meeting my future husband and decided that, not that many people make it on Broadway. So, maybe that's not such a great plan after all. So I changed my major to speech education, and I thought I would teach speech and drama. And so that's what I did.
Okay, that's a good segue, a backup plan.
Yeah.
So how did you meet your future husband?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. I had my roommate and I had all of our classes together because we were worried about getting lost on campus, and so we just got all of our classes together. So if we got lost, we'd get lost together. And so we were in Morrill Hall in our English class, and in my class was somebody that I'd known since kindergarten, and she asked me what my next class was, and I told her that it was sociology in the classroom building. And she said, "Oh, my brother's in your class," and her brother was a year older. And so my roommate and I got to class, and when they called his name, I whispered to my roommate, "I know him." And apparently I whispered a little bit louder than I intended to. And he turned around and looked at me, and I could see the look on his face, which was, I don't know who she is, And my roommate said, "He's really cute." And I said, "I know." And so my roommate said, I will make a bet with you. And I said, "Okay." And I'm a little bit competitive, so I was interested in the bet. And she said, "I bet that I can get a date with him before you." And I said, "I'll take that bet." And so I loosened the top to my pen, and I flipped it so that it went underneath his chair. And then I had hair down to here and braces on my teeth. But he turned around, I smiled really big, and I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Could you please hand me the top to my pen? It went underneath your chair." And he looked down, and there it was. And so he handed it to me, and I thanked him, and I smiled at him really big, braces and all. And so when class was over, it was raining outside. And I didn't know this at the time, but my husband is a little OCD and very organized, and he had brought an umbrella to class. And I am none of those things, and I wouldn't even think about bringing an umbrella. I wouldn't think, even to look at what the weather was going to be like. So he said, "Can I walk you back to your dorm since I have an umbrella?" And I said, "That would be great." And so I turned and looked at her, and I just smiled really big, and she just went, "Dadgum," And so we started studying for tests together, and we got engaged we started dating in November. We got engaged in February, which was really fast, and gave our parents heart attacks. And we wanted to get married that next summer. And they said, "How about the summer after?" And we said, "Well, we'll split the difference with you, and we'll wait till the next December." So we dated. We were engaged for about a year and a half, and then we got married.
That would have put it up to 72.
72, yeah. I guess wasn't a year and a half. It was just almost a year because it's February to December.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And you got to blow out the candle when it came around?
I did. Got to have the candlelight.
What kind of song do they sing? Do you remember?
"Tell me why the stars do shine. Tell me why the ivy does something." It was just a kind of a special song just for the candlelight. And I don't know if that was a real song that came from somewhere else first, or if it was just a song that was made up for this occasion, because in the end it goes, "And I will tell you just how I love you." And then it goes on and on. So I think it must have been an old song, and they just kind of just changed some of the words to make it fit a candlelight. So
it was the same one every
time.
Well, since your room wasn't air conditioned, did you study some in the library?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
Because it
was air conditioned. Yeah, and plus, if I needed to look for anything, it was a lot handier just to be right there. So yeah, and plus the library was so close to Willard Hall that it was just nothing to run up to the library.
And do you have any homecoming memories from those couple of years?
I remember, boy, the stadium was nothing like it is now, and so I remember my to-be husband and I going to the football stadium and just sitting on one of the benches like that the players sat on, and there was a purple piece of crepe paper hanging from one of the goalposts. We must have been playing K-State or something, and he ripped it off and handed it to me, and I put it in my scrapbook, which I think I still have that piece of purple crepe paper to this day somewhere. And so and I remember seeing Brent Blackman was a quarterback, and it was, the big palms that you get, for homecoming were not quite what they are now, but homecoming was big fun, and so it just wasn't nearly as fancy and as enjoyable. I mean, it was almost like a little bit one step above maybe going to a high school football game, but it was still fun. I mean,
and your date would have to get get you a mum or whatever.
Yep, a
mum or whatever they
and it
call
would say OSU and have the ribbons hanging down off of it. Yeah, it was that
I
was
haven't seen one of those in years.
I know.
Yeah, I had one once way back then.
So, and apparently, I don't know if they do that up here, but I know down in Texas, when they get one of those, now it's like this big, and the ribbons go clear down to the floor, and it's a huge undertaking to get one of those. So it's not like what we had back then. Those were much smaller and much less involved.
So when you got married, did you go back the next semester?
We did. We lived in Casa Mia Apartments. Then they're at like 9th and Duck, and they look exactly the same in the 70s as they do now. Exactly the same color, everything, and it was a great location. We lived on the bottom floor, and I had a car and Kirk had a motorcycle, and so at night we would open the front door and lay down newspapers, and he would bring the motorcycle into the living room and park in the living room at night, because there was nothing for him to lock it to. So he just would park in the living room.
So he would have been a year older than you.
Yes.
So he would have graduated from OSU in 73, 74?
74. He would have, but his dad got really sick, and so for his senior year, we had to go back to Tulsa, and his dad was a CPA, and Kirk took his last year at TU, and helped his dad, because his dad had a CPA firm, so he helped his dad at work, and just because he was actually an architecture major, and when his dad got sick, a friend of his dad's called Kirk and said, your dad may really need your help in the business, and so you need to maybe think about switching your major to accounting. So Kirk did that, and so we went back to Tulsa, and he went to TU and worked for his dad and kind of helped him, through that really rough time, and his dad, was able to get well and lived a nice long life. So that was good. But Kirk ended up working for his dad after he graduated for quite some time until he went to work for the newspaper in Oklahoma City.
So were you from Tulsa?
Yes,
And you said
he and I were
you-
both. He and I were both born in Tulsa.
You didn't know that when you first started. That
No.
you just kind of aligned there.
I knew that he was from Tulsa because I knew his younger sister.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
But I didn't know, if he was born there or something, So, but yeah.
And what did you do at that point when you went back to Tulsa?
I at that time I went to work for my dad. My dad had his own sheet metal and structural steel manufacturing shop, and my mom had worked for him, but she was kind of ready for a break, so I took her job, and it was like a one girl office. I did everything. I did payroll, and so I'd only had 2 years of college in, so I worked for him, and then the kids came along, and so then I stayed at home with the kids.
Okay.
We had 2 boys, and then when we moved back to Oklahoma City for Kirk to go to work for the Oklahoman, and when my boys got in elementary school, when they were in school full time, I went back to school, and I went to UCO, and I finished my undergraduate there, and I got a teaching job here in Edmond.
Speech and...
Actually, it wasn't, because before I went back to school, when the kids were in school, I got a job as a teaching assistant in a class for students with emotional disturbance, and I really, it really touched my heart, and I really felt like that was something that I wanted to do. Was I wanted to teach a class like that. So I had, since I had my first 2 years in, I had all my basics. Mm-hmm. So I switched my major to special education, and that's what I got my degree in.
Those jobs are easy to find, but
yeah,
not so easy to do for 20 or 30 years.
No, I did it for 16.
Okay.
But that, and I may have done it for longer, but I actually did the one that I taught emotional disturbance for a little over 10 years, but my class got so big. You're supposed to not have more than 10 students, and but my kids were doing really well, and I was just having a lot of success in my classroom, and people tend to hear about it, I guess, and they start moving into the district to get their kids in that particular school. And so I was up to 16 in my class, and I kept telling my principal, because what that means is I had sixth, 7th, and 8th graders, and I had to teach every subject, because some kids were severe enough that they were in my room the entire day. Some of them were only in my room for maybe 4 or 5 classes. Some maybe I had some in my room only for 1 class, and so, but it added up to, you had to make an individual lesson plan for every student for every subject. So that ended up being like 275 lesson plans by the time you added up all those for 16 kids. Mm-hmm. And I told the principal that she was going to have to hire another teacher, because I didn't feel like I could, continue to do this and give the kids everything that they needed. And so she said, I can't afford to do that. And so she just kept hiring more teaching assistants. And so I had 3 teaching assistants. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that's almost as difficult as it is having the kids, because they were arguing with each other about, I helped him last time and I did, and so it's like I had to referee between my teaching assistants and, tell them, I need you to do this, I need you to do this. And, so I have to, tell each one of them what I needed them to do. And so I was instructing them and all my kids as well. So it was exhausting. And so Cheyenne Middle School opened up in Edmond, and they had an opening for 7th grade special education and learning disabilities. And I knew when you teach learning disabilities, you only teach math and reading and English. And so I knew I would only have one grade level and I would only have 3 subjects. And so I applied for the job and I got it. And I went to the new school, and I'll be darned if they didn't hire 2 teachers to take my place, which I was really frustrated with, because I would have stayed longer if I would have known that they were going to have another teacher. But
that's how it happens. That's
I know.
frustrating.
It's just the way it goes sometimes.
So how long were you there? Yeah.
I was there for 3 years.
Okay.
And then Kirk got the job with the OSU Foundation, and I retired at that time because his job, I knew that there may be a lot of times that I was going to be with him for dinners or activities, and that so that I might need to take a day here or a day there. And for those kids, it's tough for them to have a substitute teacher. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't think it would be fair to try to continue to teach special education and yet know that I might be gone more than I normally would. So I just went ahead and retired. And so I was kind of, I was sad to leave my kids, but I think I was ready to. I was ready for some relaxation and to do something different. And so, although when I first moved there, and I didn't have Bella yet, who was going to be my therapy dog, but I had another Schnauzer, and so he and I were together, and we've got the house fixed up, and then I sat around and looked at him, and it was like, well, now what are we going to do, and unfortunately he passed away, and so I got another Schnauzer, which ended up being Bella, and found out about the pet therapy program, and so we started taking the training for Canine Good Citizen, and then also the training for pet therapy. And so I did that as a volunteer. Really, really enjoyed that.
Well, that was in 2013. Had you already earned your master's by that point?
I had, yes.
You did that before you did the...
Yes, I did. I did go back to school because I was kind of bored, and I was trying to decide what I was going to do. And I thought, I think I'm going to take advantage of being here at OSU, and I'm going to go back and get my master's. And so I got my master's in special education, and the way that I used it was that I've had several friends and acquaintances who had kids that were getting ready to go into a special education program, and the parents were, really unsure of, how does the system work. So I kind of volunteered as an advocate to help them. Sometimes I would go to the IEP meetings with them and just kind of explain what's available to them and what they could do, and so I enjoyed just being a volunteer in that area.
That's good. And when did you get that degree? 2000.
Let's see. I think that would have been in
2009 is what I've got. Does that sound right?
I think it was that would have been right. Yes.
Okay. So Kurt was already in with the foundation at that
yes.
point.
Oh yes, he was working at the foundation while I was in.
Had you guys already moved to Stillwater?
Yes.
At that point too?
Yes.
Okay, so we can segue into P3 if you want to then.
Yes.
How did you hear about it? Do you recall that part?
I think that Kirk might have told me about it, because they must have sent information out to all the different departments, letting them know that it was something that was going to be happening. Or it could have been, it was either Kirk, or it could have been, I was also volunteering with Coaches versus Cancer, and Kendria Cost was in charge of that, and she was also really she and Ann Hargis were the head of P3. So I don't know if I heard it directly from them or if I heard it from Kirk, but I one or the other, told me about P3, and they, she knew that I had a dog that I was crazy about. She said, you need to put Bella in the classes. And so I said, I'll do that. So Bella and I were in the very first class, and
how did that go?
We had a blast. She was the sweetest dog, the sweetest dog I ever had. but she was really funny. She absolutely would do anything for a treat, and to the point that if one of the other handlers was getting ready to give their dog a treat, suddenly Bella would just appear next to their dog, sitting there like, I'm ready for mine too. And so everyone kind of knew that Bella was going to show up for a treat, because that was just who she was. And so she got lots of laughs. And in part of our training is it's called Leave It, and that's when we're trying to train the dogs, especially because they're around kids, and sometimes the kids will be eating or something, or we'll be walking past a trash can and there might be food in it, and so the dog might, their sense of smell is so good that they would be attracted to that, and so the command is to leave it. And they have to know just to walk away and not get into it. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a tough one for Bella. But we practiced and practiced and practiced it. And so when we got to the first time we had to try it, in front of the people who were judging us, the treat was laying on the floor and we were supposed to walk past it. And I told her to leave it. And so she walked past it, and all of a sudden she just became Bella the ninja dog, and she just reached and grabbed it real fast and kept walking like maybe they won't see me. And everybody in the room just burst out laughing, And so I said, can we try this again? And they said, yes, you can try it again. And I said, Bella, you can't eat the treat. I said, we have to leave it. And so we put the treat back down, and so we were walking towards the treat, and I said, Bella, leave it. And so this time she just walked like 5 feet around it, as if to say, if I can't have it, I'm not going to walk anywhere near it because I can't resist it. So, and so the judges said, that's perfectly fine. If that's her way of, of self-control, that's fine with us, So she was able to do that. And then the other thing that I wasn't sure she was going to be able to do is that you're supposed to tell them to sit and then walk away, and she's supposed to stay. And you only have to walk about 20 feet away, but that one took us some time as well, because wherever I went, she was like right next to me. And so what I learned is I could tell her to stay and I could walk away, but I couldn't look, because if I looked, she'd come running. Mm-hmm. So, because you're supposed to turn around and then say, okay, as a release. But I never even had to say anything. All I had to do was turn around, So I would tell her to stay, and I would walk the 20 feet, and I would keep saying to myself, don't turn around, Bella, don't come, And then as soon as I would get to the 20 feet, I would turn around, and she would just come tearing down that 20 feet path, but she would stay there. So we thankfully were able to pass our good citizen and also get our therapy dog certificate.
Sounds like you had to practice at home.
We had to practice at home a lot, yes.
Do you remember who the trainer was?
I do not. I don't.
I haven't talked to one yet, so I was wondering.
I don't remember who the trainer was. Alyssa is
now.
is now, and she was there then, and so she would help us quite a bit.
Okay.
But she wasn't the main trainer at the time.
What if you hadn't passed those two things?
You could test again.
But how many times it took?
I don't know. Thankfully, I didn't have to find out. But but I think that I think all the dogs that were in our first class, they all passed. And but we did a lot of practicing as a group. We would meet as a group, and we would do all the practicing, together, so they would get used to being around other handlers and other dogs, and it made it a lot better and a lot easier for them to understand what was going on and what they were doing.
A little peer pressure for them.
Absolutely.
Where would the sessions be?
Sometimes we would be on the third floor of the student union. Sometimes we would be over at Whitehurst in the hallway, and we would just go to different places.
I guess you had to practice where they would want to be once they started serving. That makes sense too. Mm-hmm. Would you have to do much with Vet Med?
Well, Vet Med, they were wonderful. They would give us, we could take the dogs over there, and they would give us dog food, and they would check the dogs out, and they were just very helpful with the dogs, and so we were just really appreciative of the connection that we had with Vet Med.
So they had to kind of pass a health test,
yes,
and then a behavior test,
mm-hmm.
and then it was pretty much done deal at that point. And then it becomes a time thing for the handler.
Yes, yeah, and they just would send us a schedule, and then we would keep track of how much, of how much time we spent. Like if we went to the library or the student union or to a fraternity or sorority house, how long we were there. And we would try to keep track of, maybe approximately how many kids we got to see. Mm. And, because they wanted to kind of keep track of the success of the program and how many kids it was reaching. So we didn't do it. They didn't do that like the first maybe 6 months or so, but then they realized, we really need to kind of keep track of this and see how successful the program really is. And so we started kind of keeping track, and it was, it was really interesting because when we would say, okay, it's going to be Wagon Wednesday at the library, there were kids that knew that the dogs were going to be there, and there would be a group of kids that'd be waiting for us when we got there, and they would show up just because they knew the dogs were going to be there.
How did Bella react to that many? She
loved it. She loved people, and so she loved to be petted. So it was a perfect perfect thing for her to do, because she was never shy around, kids or adults either, just anybody that wanted to come and see her and pet her. She was fine with 100%. And I'm beginning to think now that, at first I wondered about Shelby, about whether she would have been, because we lived in Stillwater for a while before we moved back to Edmond, but I didn't do Shelby. I didn't think about putting Shelby in it for a while because Shelby seemed like she liked women, but she didn't like the men very much. Mm-hmm. But now she's gotten to the point that she kind of has decided that she likes everybody. So, used to, I remember living in Stillwater, and the cable guy came to fix my television, and Shelby ran and hid behind the sofa, and he was a really nice guy, and he even had a dog treat in his vest, and she would not come out from behind that sofa, and he, he tried to entice her with the dog treat, and she still wouldn't come out, and so he set the dog treat down on the coffee table, and then he went out to his car to get something out of the car, and she ran out from behind the sofa, and she grabbed the dog treat, and then she went right back behind it. And so when he came back in, I said, "Well, she got your treat, but she's back behind the sofa again." He thought that was pretty funny, but
She did a Bella then.
she did. She did.
So let's talk a little bit about Bella then. Just introduce us to Bella.
Bella was a beautiful little silver schnauzer, silver and white schnauzer, and she was, she was really easy to get along with. In fact, Anne had Anne had Scruff at the time, and sometimes Scruff had a little bit more of a difficult time with the other dogs, and I think Scruff does great with him now, but he was kind of new at the time, and so I think that Anne would she would schedule Scruff with Bella because Bella just was so easygoing and so mild-mannered that, in fact, one time, Scruff kind of got upset over something, I don't know, and kind of growled and went after her just for a second, and Bella just stopped, and then she just turned and she looked at me like, "What was that all about?" But she didn't respond, and it was just like, "Oh my gosh," but it wasn't anything bad, didn't hurt or anything, but Anne kept working with Scruff, and Scruff gradually learned it's okay, the other dogs are fine, and in fact, what they really prefer with all the dogs is they don't really want you to have the dogs together. They prefer you keep the dogs apart from each other because, some dogs are great with people, but not necessarily always great with other dogs. And so they kind of, that's kind of the rule. And that was kind of hard sometimes because Bella she loves everybody and, animals, people, and so she also, we went with Kendria and Charlie, Sir Charles, quite often. And she loved that because Charlie got lots of treats. And so Kendria always knew to bring extra treats because Bella would be right there next to Charlie. And I think sometimes I could almost just picture Charlie sort of mentally rolling his eyes, like, really, but he was a sweetheart too. And so, if Bella was right there next to him, he didn't care. It was fine with him.
So about how old was she when you started this?
She was about, I'm going to say she was like 7 or 8, and then unfortunately I'd gone to a bowl game, and Kirk had stayed home, and he called me when I was at the ball game and told me that she'd had a seizure, and so he took her to the vet, and when I got home he told me that the vet said that she was full of cancer, and it was in her spinal cord, and it was in her brain, and this was the vet med center at OSU, and the vet that we were talking to, he had schnauzers as well, and I said, "Okay, so you have schnauzers. What would you do?" I said, "Is there any treatment? Would you try chemotherapy? Is there any treatment?" And he said, "It's metastasized already." And he said, And the problem is, it's in her spleen, and her spleen could burst. And he said that would be really, really horrible for you and for her. And so he said, so unfortunately, the best thing that you can do is put her down. So I said, well, could we wait until the weekend, until our sons come home, so at least they could have a chance to say goodbye to her. And he said that we could. I learned that I will never do that again, because that was like, it was like dead man walking, except it was a dog. Knowing every day that that her days were numbered was probably the most painful thing that I've ever had to go through. And I mean, I can remember putting makeup on, and she was sitting where she always sat, in the doorway watching me. And I can remember just bursting into tears, and she looked at me like, what'd I do? And I just was like, it's okay, you didn't do anything, but it was just really, really hard. So, I think they made it as wonderful and as sweet as they possibly could. They had a nice little room. It wasn't like an exam room with metal tables and stuff. It had a sofa in there, and it had plants, and I got to hold her, and so it's never good, but it was the best that it could possibly be.
Mm-hmm. How did the P3 program handle that? I'm assuming she was the first.
She was the first
to be.
And it was real sad for all of us, and so they just they honored her. In fact, we have a Pete's Pet Posse celebration garden, and they talked to Kirk and I about it because the foundation was going to do some fundraising, because not only were they going to do a garden, but they wanted to commission an artist to do a bench with a dog and a handler and a student. And so so Kirk had asked, if we made a contribution, if the dog could be in the likeness of Bella. Oh. And they said that we could do that. And so and then he talked to Kendria's husband, and he said, would you like to have the handler be in Kendria's likeness? And he said, I absolutely would. He said, I would make a contribution in order to see that happen. So he did that, and then the artist I'm not sure. I think I heard that the student may have done that in his granddaughter's likeness, but I'm not positive. But he did a wonderful job, and the dog really looks like Bella. So I love the fact that really just her memory kind of lives on, forever, and it's in celebration of P3. So that's very special to me.
How did I'm assuming you took showed him pictures, or what did he use for his model?
I took him a picture of Bella, and he did it off of the picture.
Did you get to see it before it was unveiled?
No.
So you were surprised too?
Yeah, I didn't see it until we went for the unveiling at the garden.
You knew it was going to be her. Did Kendria know it was going to be her?
No, it was a surprise to Kendria. So that was really great too. I was excited about that.
Okay.
So she was shocked when they pulled the tarp off of the statues, and she didn't quite know what to say.
She's done a lot for it, from what I understand.
She and Anne have been the heart and soul of the program.
Yeah. So from the They started, you've graduated in, P3 graduated like in August or September-ish of 2013. So you would have worked that semester with them. Did you do anything like for holidays, like for Halloween or homecoming or Christmas, that type of thing special with the dogs?
Not really. I just, it was getting ready to be finals. And so what we would do, because the kids go home for finals, and so, but we would go, because, the kids, like the week of finals, we would take dogs every night that week of finals and go up to the library, and we would bring pizzas and we would pass them out to the kids that were studying, and we would have dogs, just so they could take a break and pet a dog for a little while, and they just thought that was the greatest thing ever, because not only were they getting some free pizza, but they also got to hug on a dog for a while. So that was a really welcome thing to the kids. They really loved it.
Poor Bella, though, she had to leave it a lot.
She had to leave a lot of things alone. Yes, she did. So I just had lots of little snacks in my little pack when we would go on those nights. And the other funny thing with her is she didn't like to walk on tile. And something about it being cold on her paws or something. And so sometimes at the library, I would just be walking along and I could pull her and just slide her along the floor, or because she was about this size, a lot of times I would just pick her up and take her, because we would go upstairs where the kids were all in their carols studying, and fortunately that was all a carpeted area. So we could go up the stairs. I would just carry her up the stairs, and we would to the carpeted area, and then as soon as she hit the carpet, she was fine. So, but they would laugh about the fact that, or we'd go to the student union, and I would carry her into the spot that we were going to be in, even if it was a tile spot. She would sit down and she would stay right there, and she was fine. But the good thing is I knew she wouldn't run off, because she didn't want to walk on the tile,
Right. Her own little personality, didn't she?
She had her little quirks, that's for sure.
So she would have been about 7 then. Okay, so they made you look for more mature dogs,
well,
instead of puppies.
I don't think that age is a factor.
Okay.
I think that it's more the personality of the dog. And so, if the dog is, even at a young dog, if the dog is real trainable and responds well to her owner, then I think it'd be fine, from the day in the program. But it's just, it has to be, if it's a real frisky puppy that that the owner tells them to do something and they might do it, they might not. That's probably not going to be a great candidate.
Yeah.
They might just have to mature a little bit until they've settled down and they've learned how to behave and how to respond to commands.
So the first class, I understand, was 8 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So she would have been part of that. And then what about the second year?
It was about the same number.
Was it the same?
Not too many more, I don't think.
Okay. And then I guess it has grown a lot in the last, 4 or 5 years, I guess.
It has. And it's wonderful that we have them at OSU OKC and OSU Tulsa. And, I mentioned Coaches versus Cancer. And one of the things that Coaches versus Cancer does every year is they have a celebration every year. The National Cancer Society American Cancer Society is the official sponsor of birthdays. So we have a huge birthday bash every year, and we invite the kids with cancer from Oklahoma City and Tulsa. We end up having about 300 people, and all the sports representatives from all the sports come, and they plan a little game that they're going to play with the kids. And we have pizza and salad, and we have birthday cake. And so they play games, and they have pizza, and they have birthday cake, and we have P3 dogs there, and so we usually have maybe 4 or 5 dogs come because that's a lot of people.
A lot of volume they'll have to get used to the.
They do, that's another thing that the dogs have to be aware of is, especially in a situation like that one, it's going to be loud, and so if noise is going to be a problem, of course, if we're in the student union, that's going to be noisy as well.
Yeah.
So so they have to be not afraid when there's a lot of activity going on and it's noisy.
So that's part of the training too, or the test at least.
And I think, part of the reason that we do it in the group, and sometimes what they would do in our training is we would have students volunteer to just come and walk up and down the halls and make noise so that they would get used to that. Mm-hmm. And we would walk among them and just kind of get used to the fact that we're going to be walking down the hallways and there's going to be lots of kids and just kind of get used to maneuvering your way among all the kids and if somebody wanted to bend down and pet her, that was just fine, and she absolutely thought it was great, so the noise and the kids, that didn't bother her at all. The more the merrier as far as she was concerned.
What kind of training did they do that for the handlers? Any particular?
They just gave us a little, booklet and told us, here's some things that you need to work on, and you can work on these things at home, and then, your dogs need to be able to do, all the things that we were going to have to do for the testing, and so, be sure that you practice, 30 minutes a day or however much time it takes, yeah. And they gave us suggestions on good ways to practice with them, and then they would remind us that for everything that we would go to, we would bring treats, and we would bring little bags in case there is an accident somewhere that we could take it with us. We wouldn't leave any messes behind, and I would bring like a collapsible bowl with water. So if she got thirsty, I could punch the bowl and pour water in it, and she could have something to drink. Because sometimes, that gets a little long, and it sometimes it's kind of warm and with all the activities and stuff, then she gets kind of thirsty. So
most of the events, for lack of a better word, an hour long or 2 hours long, or was it?
Usually a couple of hours.
A couple of hours, okay. Well, you would get, yeah. So for gear then, I've seen them with backpacks.
Yep. We had backpacks, and then they had little vests that they wore to identify that they were P3 dogs, and we had T-shirts.
Okay. So on the vest, did it have their name?
It did.
Had their name?
Yeah. We got little patches, and it had their name, and it said, "I'm friendly, pet me."
Did you guys have to make them, or did they give them ordered, or how?
No, they provided those for us.
Okay. Even with the names already there?
I think, I'm trying to remember.
I mean, you can do all sorts of things nowadays, so I don't know.
They gave us the patches, and we sewed the patches on.
Okay.
So but the vests, were, Kendra said, of course they have to be orange, so, so, I think that, I'm pretty sure, I hope I'm not lying by saying that it had their name on it, because the vest I have for her now has a name on it. So I might be, it may just be
the paw.
It may just be saying that it's Pete's Pet Posse. So.
And they had to be kind of uniform so that you knew that they were part of P3 and not
absolutely
something else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's, the issue at the beginning was service dog versus P3 dogs, plus what's the other one? There's another.
Therapy dogs.
Okay.
Yeah, therapy dogs. A P3 dog, it's a pet therapy program, but it's not exactly the same as a therapy dog that would go to nursing homes and hospitals. And so now it wouldn't have been much to go to, because I think that we went through the same therapy program. I don't know what we would have had to do different, honestly, to be able to, we may have had to do another test in order to be able to qualify to be that kind of therapy dog. But this was, this was a special pet therapy program, and so that was designed for campuses, and actually. I know that we've had colleges and universities from all over the United States that have heard about the program and wanted to have a program like that at their campus, and so they've come and observed, what we've done, and talked to the people that at P3 and ask them how they got it started, and so so. Other pet therapy programs have been birthed, I think, as a result of us having ours at OSU.
And I understand it's self-funded, or at least it started out as self-funded, and I guess it pretty much still is. I don't know.
It is self-funded. I think that the foundation does maybe some. I know the foundation accepts donations for P3, yes. Because there are some people that that have loved the program and that have said, we would like to donate to P3, and so the foundation absolutely has a fund that they set aside that's just for P3.
That's another connection with you and Bella. And did you have to spend time with her in the foundation?
I didn't have to. It wasn't, most pet therapy dogs are, their owners work on campus somewhere. And so a lot of times, if they're, they'll be taken to campus for the day and to be with their owner, and they'll put a little sign out and say, like if it was Bella, they'll say, Bella is in today, and they'll have a little bed next to where they're sitting, and she could stay right there, and anybody that wanted to come down and hang out with her could, and that's the way it's done all over campus. But so what I would do is I would just go to the foundation and just take her around and let her see people and let her get petted. So she would just go and greet everybody and hang out and have fun, basically.
And when she was doing that, she had to have on her vest?
Yes.
And she had to be on a little leash?
She had to be on a leash, yes.
And you had to be with her?
Yes.
Okay. If any of that didn't work, then somebody would know, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. But I didn't, it was, I didn't mind at all. I knew most all the people at the foundation, so it was fun for me to take her there. And
they probably loved seeing her come in the door, didn't
they?
They
did. They really enjoyed it. And eventually the foundation had its own therapy dog that stayed there all the time. So sometimes Bella could, I think that dog may have come along after Bella was gone. But so the foundation eventually did get their therapy dog that got to stay there all the time, because they really did want to have a dog there.
So when you were first in it, do you recall a response to a sad event, like a sorority or a fraternity or something?
I do.
Go do that?
There was a sorority that over spring break, one of the girls had been killed in an automobile accident. And so when they came back, we took dogs over to the sorority, and I know Anne was there with Scruff, and I was there with Bella, and all the girls came down, and we just let the dogs stay. We were just gonna let them stay and love on the dogs, and I really wasn't even going to give them a time limit, just however much time they needed, Mm-hmm. And they really appreciated and just there was just lots of dog loving going on, and I think that it really meant a lot to them to be able to just the idea that somebody cared enough about them that they wanted to make them feel better, and they said they couldn't think of anything better to make them feel better than be able to love on dogs,
Sometimes words just don't work, do they?
No.
While the dogs were doing their job, what were you and Ann doing?
Sometimes the kids will want to come talk to us, and sometimes all of their attention is focused on the dogs, and that's just fine with us. It's interesting. I know sometimes in the student union, like back to school, I noticed that a lot of the kids talked to us more than they did. Of course, in the library, there wasn't a lot of talking going on because it was a little bit quieter place. And so basically we just walked around and they just kind of loved on the dogs. And we didn't really visit with the kids much. And because one of the things that they want the handlers to understand is that we're not counselors. Mm-hmm. And so even if kids are going through rough times and sometimes they might want to tell you all their problems and that kind of thing, and you can listen with a sympathetic ear, but you have to be kind of careful not to try to counsel, because that's not our job and that's not what we're trained to do. And what we do is if we notice a kid that we think is really struggling, then we will report that to the student services or the counselors on campus, and say, we notice that this student is having a particularly difficult time, and so sometimes we might be able to get them some help if needed. Usually, though, that would go to Kendi or the people that were in charge of P3, and they would handle that kind of situation.
I'm thinking after 2 hours of interactions like that, you'd need some downtime too, along with Bella.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's interesting though, because I know, it just kind of happens sometimes that when you're there with a dog, and especially for somebody that is struggling, they do come up, and I had a young man that said, "Oh, so this is one of the therapy dogs," and he said, "I think that's a great idea that you have these on campus." He said, because I have, and he just started naming all the emotional issues that he had, and which were pretty serious. And I said, I'm really proud of you. I said that you're here on campus and you're working to get your degree. I said, I think that's great, and he said, I'll probably be visiting the dogs a lot. And I said, well, we'll be really happy to see you, but it's like when they see a dog there, a therapy dog there, it's almost like they want to come and they want to talk to the handler too, and we just have to make sure that they understand that we're not counselors, that we're just dog handlers.
You can listen.
Yeah, I can listen, but that's about all I can do.
Well, with your background is a pretty good fit.
Yes,
not all handlers would have
that. And I could have gone a little further with my background, but I didn't, because that's not what we were supposed to do.
And you guys had training to say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you have very many of those sessions throughout the year, just for the handlers?
That was part of the training going in.
Okay.
Yeah, they would tell us, what our roles were supposed to be.
Okay, now someone else has mentioned this, so I want you to too. The Christmas card photo.
The Christmas card photo, yes. We took a picture, and it was over in the student union. It was in front of the fireplace, and it was Burns and Ann and all the dogs. And it was so funny trying to get all the dogs to sit still and then get out of the way long enough for them to take the picture. And Bella ended up being on Ann's lap, and because Bella wanted to play, and so they were able to get 3 or 4 shots, and it ended up being the cutest Christmas card I've ever seen. But they got Burns and Ann and all the dogs, and ended up being a great Christmas card.
And Scruff didn't mind.
Scruff didn't mind. Nope, Scruff. I think Scruff, I can't remember if he was right next to Ann or right next to Burns, but one of them, he was right next to there. And they had a good hold on Scruff, but by this time Scruff was, he'd been doing this long enough that he was kind of pretty used to the other dogs. He'd been around all of them for a while, so he was okay with it by then.
So the handlers weren't in the shop then?
Just the dogs.
Just the dogs.
Just the dogs.
That makes it even more challenging.
Yeah.
Stay.
Yes, they all had to stay still.
And you had to be.
And we got them all positioned, and then we backed out, and they took the pictures. So
you'd have to just about turn around so she wouldn't come to you.
Yeah.
That's sweet. Did they just do the one as far as you know?
I think so. I don't know that they've done one since then.
I haven't seen that one either. So, and they have the training cards. Did Bella have a training card?
She did. Yes. I don't even know what I've done with them since then. But we passed out the training cards. The trading cards every chance we got. And the kids, it was interesting. I mean, they collect. Some of the kids were collecting, see if they could get a card from everybody. So. Yeah, that was fun.
Do you remember that photo shoot?
I don't. I don't
she
remember.
Must have behaved then. Must not have been too challenging.
Yeah.
If you did. Okay, and then I was told to ask you about an orange convertible.
Yes. So I had a little orange Boxster with a black top, and Kirk used to tell me that I had to behave myself and not speed because everybody knew my car. So he said they're going to know if you get pulled over for a ticket, everybody's going to know that's you. So you better behave, And so Shelby and I would show up in our little orange Boxster, and I'd pull all of her stuff out of it, and off we would go. So we had a good time in that little car.
Was it ever in the homecoming parade?
It was
with Bella or with or no?
I don't think that Bella was in the homecoming parade, but I think that not that I remember. Okay. But the car was in the homecoming parade more than once. Sometimes they wanted it just with somebody sitting up on the back of it, because it was just the perfect color and it was a little car, and so it was fun.
Convertibles get dusted off for
they
homecoming
do.
parade.
They certainly do.
So during that time, too, is when OSU was growing with T. Boone Pickens funds and Brandon Success and all of that. So, do you have any highlights from that time period?
Well, that was a really interesting time, and I think one of the funniest memories I have is that Kirk told me that we were going to go to a dinner, and that Boone had purchased this dinner, and it was going to be at Walt Garrison's ranch. Mm-hmm. And so we went to Walt Garrison's ranch. It was Walt Garrison and his lady friend, and then it was Boone and Madeline Pickens, and it was Burns and Ann and Kirk and I, and it was the guy that donated all the money to the College of Business. I can't remember.
Spears?
Bill and Candy Spears. That was the other couple, yes. And so, and one of the things that Boone said was that he would purchase this dinner as long as they served calf fries. Well, I will never forget the dinner because apparently Walt's chef was from Ethiopia or something, and obviously he had never cooked calf fries before, and so when he brought them out, there were three of them, and they were on skewers, like if you were going to make a shish kebab.
Mm-hmm.
It was like on the end of the skewer, and it was the whole calf fry. It wasn't cut in, normally for the calf fry that they have every year, those are sliced very thin, and they're breaded and they're fried, and I actually tasted a little sliver of those, and they taste fairly good, but this, it was a whole calf fry on the end of a skewer, and there were three of them, and they were like this, like a little teepee, and they were stuck down in those white rice noodles,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was a little bit of barbecue sauce. And when he put those on the table, it was like complete silence. We were all looking at each other like we didn't know what to do with them. And Madeline Pickens was a vegetarian, so she didn't have to. And I was like, why didn't I say I was a vegetarian? And I looked at Kirk, and he said, well, you have to try. You got to take one for the team, and I just didn't know if I could do it or not. And Burns was seated right at my left, and in his pocket he had this little he had his phone with a camera, and every time I started to take a bite of it, he would pull that out, and because he was going to take a picture of it, because apparently the look on my face was not the greatest. Yeah. And so I finally got it up to my mouth, and I took, I don't know what, I think I must have just taken a little bite of the coating or something, but it was just the most disgusting thing I've ever seen, and then I took them all, and I put them down where the rice noodles were, and then I just kind of buried them in the rice noodles so that I wouldn't have to eat anymore, because those were not going to go any further in my mouth. It was really disgusting, but it was something that I'd been served that I'll never forget.
Well, I'm assuming it was how Boone wanted it, though. It's prepared.
No, I don't think he wanted it prepared that way either. He was as shocked, I think, as everybody else was, and I can't even tell you what anybody else did with them, because I was so worried about what I was supposed to do with it. And so I don't really think anybody ate their calf fries. I think a lot of people just kind of buried theirs as well, but
You needed a doggy bag.
Absolutely.
Not for the dog.
Not for the dog. For the trash. Yeah, for sure.
Well, there's some fun memories there then.
But it was, wonderful to be able to be there, and we reached the goal of $1 billion, and we reached it ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
and we went over $1 billion, and it was just, it was when Burns said he wanted to do, he wanted it to be $1 billion campaign. I think that everyone at the foundation kind of gulped and said, well, okay, then let's get after it. And they worked really, really hard. And of course, Burns was out there working as well. And the wonderful thing is, Boone, he set the example for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He made these wonderful gifts, and some people were afraid, well, maybe he, people aren't going to give because they'll just think that Boone can take care of it. But that wasn't what happened at all. It was exactly the opposite. When Boone gave his gift, and he also said that he would match other gifts, people just began to think, he's making such a huge difference at our university, and if he can do that, I can do that. And some people could give in big ways, and some people could only give in little ways, but every gift mattered, no big or small, and every gift helped us get to that $1 billion mark.
And sooner than
And
right.
sooner than
Yeah.
you know than we had set the date for. So it was an exciting time, and it was a turnkey moment for the university. I mean, it was life changing for the university.
I can remember them having the ceremony out on the library lawn when Boone was up on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, we had one on the library lawn. I think that was on Boone's birthday. And then we had another
That
one.
may have been, yeah.
We had another one in the plaza at the student union when we were able to drop the sign down that said, 1 billion, or whatever the number was, and that was pretty exciting.
I imagine that was not a 40-hour-a-week.
No, that wasn't just 40 hours a week. That was lots of evenings, and because there were just a lot of development isn't just you don't just go and sit down and say, here I am, and I'd like for you to make a donation. What development is getting to know the people that that came to the university, and really forming a relationship with them, and then just it's not like used car salesman. It's not it's not high pressure. It's just saying it's great to see you, and then and then finding out what are you interested in. What on campus is exciting and interesting to you, and making sure that they can come and be a part of things that they might like to see on campus that they haven't maybe seen in a long time. Maybe some of them haven't visited campus in a long time. So, inviting people back to campus. We've had people come from California. We have a lot of people in California. We have a lot of people in New York City. And so, we would go there, or we would have them come, and we would invite them to football games or, different things. And it's just forming that relationship. And then as that relationship is formed and they see things that are happening on campus, it's just like P3. There were people that just thought that P3 was such a great idea, and and they had come to the foundation, or come to the people at P3 and said, we would like to make a donation to P3. Not even because anybody asked them, just because they thought it was a wonderful program, and that's how a lot of donations happen, or they wanted to give a scholarship in somebody's name, and in fact, I had a car that was orange, and it was a little Mercedes convertible, and we found it in Columbia, South Carolina. Kirk had seen it, and I was looking for a car, and he said, I think I might have found a great car for you, and because they had custom painted it that color, and it was like a pearl orange. It was beautiful, and I think that they had thought that they were going to paint this car this great color. And because they had pro football teams and other teams not far away from the area, I think they thought they would have a buyer from one of those venues, but they hadn't sold it. It'd been there for a long time. So Kirk was able to get it for a really good price. So we flew out to South Carolina and bought the car and drove it back. And I was at Willard for a meeting. And so one of our donors came up to me, and he said to me, I heard that was your car in the parking lot, that orange Mercedes. And I said, it is. And he said, well, I hope you don't mind. But he said, I'm going to go to my Mercedes dealer on Monday, and I'm going to order one just like it. And I said, well, I hate to tell you this, but you can't order one just like it, because I explained to him that it was a special paint job, and how. So 2 weeks later, Kirk came home and he said, well, he said, I don't think you're going to want to do this, but I got a phone call from his name was Brian Close, and he said, and he wants to offer you, he wants to make you an offer, and he said he will pay you everything we paid for the car and everything that it cost us to go get it, plus $20,000 to OSU, anywhere you wanted to go. And so I said, absolutely, he can have it. And he said, really? He said, you've only had it for 2 months. I didn't think you'd want to sell it. I said, are you kidding? I said, for, to make a donation like that, I said, absolutely. And so he said, well, if you're willing to do that, then I think what we should do is that we should, and this was before P3, but he said, I think what we should do is we should form a scholarship in the College of Education for anyone who wants to be a special education teacher. So he said, I think that we should call it the Jan Jewell Endowed Scholarship. So I said, I think that would be great. So we continued to pay into the scholarship until it qualified for the Pickens match. And so now I'm able to give scholarships to students every year, and it's it has reached its it's endowed now. So now it'll be given in perpetuity. It'll long after I'm gone, it'll still be there to be able to give to students that want to be special education teachers.
Do you get to meet some of the ones that
every year I get to meet the students, and I've kept in touch with some of them, and so it's been a real blessing for me and hopefully for them as well.
And did the other convertible come after it or before it?
After.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a kind of a replacement of sorts.
It did. Yeah. I've always loved little, convertibles, and always loved putting the top down. So we found this one used, and it was a really great price, and so it was a real fun car to have.
Stick?
Yes, 6-speed.
I can't do it. I guess it just about all are, aren't they, for the...
Well, the Mercedes was not. It was an automatic, and so it was funny because I had the car during P3, and finally, Kirk said, it's that one. It's about getting time that we might need to sell it and get you something else, because he said, it's going to start having things go wrong with it, and he said, do you have any idea what you would like? And I said, I would like another orange Boxster with a black top. And he said, that one came orange. He said, they don't make them orange anymore, so we would have to pay for a custom paint job if we did that, And I said, okay. So we waited for quite some time till, we kind of, as long as I could put it off, but I finally got another Boxster that was orange that we had painted. And I had that one until I moved here, and I really, in fact, Kirk and I took a trip, and we took the river cruise down the Rhine, and it ended in Basel, Switzerland, and we took a bus trip. Was it? No, it was a train. We took the train from Basel to Stuttgart, Germany, and we toured the Porsche factory. And I told him that I had to wait a year because my car was a paint to sample, is what they call it. And he said, I remember your car, the guy that was doing the tour. And I said, you do? And he said, yes, because if it's not in the line, if it's paint to sample, then it has to be taken out and taken to a special bay to be painted. And he said, and we all really liked the color of it. So, because it'd been about a year, since I'd gotten it. So, but a year later, and he still remembered the car.
It's hard to forget orange.
It is hard to forget. Yeah, orange and black are good colors.
The brightest orange, America's brightest orange.
Absolutely. And I couldn't get OSU orange, but I got it was called Gulf orange, which is the color that Porsche had on their sports car, on their racing car, which theirs was orange and blue, but when it came in, I was really pleased to see that it was really, really close to OSU orange. So I was thrilled with it.
So an orange car. What color is your car now?
Now,
not orange. Huh?
No, it's blue, but
Okay.
it's bright blue. It's a pretty blue, but if I had another chance to get a bright orange one like that, I would.
You see a few, but you've got to be custom. Most of the orange ones you see on campus have to be.
There are more dealers the past few years that have come out. There's more cars that have come out with an orange car. I think after Porsche did it, the first one was an 08, and then my second one was a 2016, and of course it didn't come orange, but I had it painted orange. But I think that 08 car kind of started something, and some of the other dealerships started coming out with orange cars as well.
It's a pretty color.
It is really pretty.
Beats yellow any day.
It does.
So Kurt retired in 2020 during the COVID thing?
He did. Yeah. In fact, they couldn't really do a retirement celebration or anything, but what they did instead was they had one of those parades where the cars come by, and it was really nice because people weren't coming into the office at that time. They were working remotely. So and some of our people, they used to have to drive in to work anyway because they didn't live in Stillwater. So people drove in from wherever they lived, and they did the parade just to drive by and wish Kirk well. But they brought their kids and they made signs, and so that was really sweet and a lot of fun.
So they were doing the drive-by, or
they were doing the
drive-by.
drive-by. We were standing out in front of the foundation.
Well, that's something you don't think about with COVID, the impact of COVID. Did COVID have the reason why he retired?
No.
Okay, a lot of people have said that's why they retired. Why they have retired because of COVID.
No, he just felt like it was time.
His time. Well,
Yeah.
17 years.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Very long time.
Yeah.
Maybe the longest serving in that position, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know
either.
I think could be.
But, he and Burns worked really well together, and Gary Clark had been the counsel for the foundation, and he moved over and became the counsel for the university. So it ended up being, Kirk and Gary Clark and Burns, and, and then also, of course, the provost, and all of them just seemed to be just a really good group that worked well together, and a lot of things took place.
A lot did.
Yeah, during those years that they were together.
And campus looks so much better,
And I do, and I have to give Burns and Ann credit for all of that, because that was a real. They really had a heart for that. They really did want the campus to be more beautiful, and so not only with the beautiful horticulture that's been, the plants and everything that have been planted all over, but the artwork too, because that's important to them too. So the campus has just become so much more beautiful in the years that they were here.
think, and then you were supportive of art too, weren't you?
I absolutely, it's big in my, and they've also, they opened the art museum while Burns and Ann were there. And so that was another huge project that got off the ground and is doing great. So,
and then you were part of the Women
for OSU.
Women for OSU.
Yeah, and the whole time that I was there, in fact, just I was there, really. Now they've got, we have term limits, but we didn't have term limits for a long time. So I was there for a really, really long time, and then after I finally went off, I was kind of an emeritus, member until Kirk retired. So that was a great experience, and to see us go from just giving a couple of scholarships our first year to to now the scholarship is over $1 million, the endowment, and we give scholarships to, gosh, I don't even know what the number of kids was this last year that we were able to give scholarships to, but it's really grown, and it's just been amazing, and recognizing a philanthropist of the year. We've had some wonderful women philanthropists, and we've had amazing speakers come every year.
Laura Bush comes to mind. For me, the librarian, Laura Bush comes to mind.
Absolutely, yes. That was her heart. So
yes, you had some fun at OSU then.
Yeah, my years at OSU have been were just so special, and
you were a grad teacher, or did something.
I got to, while I was getting my master's degree, I taught that every education major has to teach the class on educating exceptional learners, which I don't know if that's what they call it now, but because every teacher is going to have a special needs student in their class at some point or another, and so every education major has to take this class to understand what it's going to be like to have a special needs student in your class. And so the class teaches them all the different categories of exceptionality, and also in the class that I taught, I would tell them, okay, so here's what the textbook says, and here's what it's really going to be like in your class.
Mm-hmm.
And because coming out of teaching special ed, I kind of had a leg up on being able to give them a little bit of extra knowledge about this is what it's going to be like in your classroom. And I also gave them I gave them, every one of them had a project that they had to do, which was just to spend 10 hours with a student who had special needs. And I said, you can do it. You can, if you don't know anybody, I can send you to different schools that will allow you to come, spend time with one of their students. And so I can send you some places, or if you know somebody that their child has special needs and you want to do it, you want to go over and shoot hoops with them, or you want to help them with their homework or whatever, that's fine too. But I want you to write a paper about how you're feeling before you go, and how you're feeling in the middle of your 10 hours with the student, and then how you felt at the end. Mm-hmm. And I think probably every single one of them told me that they thought that was like the best project that they did, because a majority of them had never spent any time with a student that had any kind of a disability. And they said they were really nervous before they went, and afterwards they said that it helped them so much because they enjoyed their time with the student. they enjoyed feeling like that they could make a difference in the kid's life. And some of them, a couple of them said that they think that they might want to switch their major to special education, because after spending time with it, with a student that had special needs, and how it made them feel, they thought that maybe they might like to make that their life's work. So, and that I wasn't doing it to make them all special ed teachers. I was just doing it because I needed them to understand what it was going to be like to have a student with special needs in their class. But they all said that they thought that it was just one of the greatest projects that they've had to do, because they knew that it was going to be something they were going to be faced with. So to get to do this before they come into their classroom, they thought it was just a really great idea.
You have some like real world experience.
Absolutely.
It can't be beat, can it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So from OSU Willard to they had Women of Willard. Sometimes they call themselves Women of Willard. I don't know if that was during your time or after, but they still. Do you remember what your room number was? A lot of them still remember what their room number, what floor.
I absolutely remember what floor. It was the first floor, and in fact, when I was teaching there, Dr. Davis was the associate dean, and so I would tell the kids, when I went to OSU, this was my dorm, because Willard, is the College of Education, and I said, and my bedroom was in Dr. Davis's office. They were kind of like, they were kind of like, I don't even want to think about that, but I said, but it was on the first floor, and it was a great place to live, and I loved every minute of it. So
where would you have to park if you had a car? Where did you park your car?
They still had those same parking spaces.
And students could park there?
Yep.
Or was administration then?
It was still, Whitehurst was still there, but
okay.
But we had that side parking lot too. So of course you had to be sure you get there in time, because I'm not sure that there were enough spots for every student to park there.
So you got it and stayed until you left.
Mm-hmm.
Would you go home very often? Did you get homesick and go home very often?
I went home some, but not every weekend.
Tulsa wasn't that far either.
No. I do remember that when Kirk and I got engaged, we wanted to go home that weekend to show our parents the engagement ring. We got our ring at Keepsake Corner, which was a little bitty jewelry store down on Main Street in Stillwater, and so it just so happened that the weekend that we decided to go home, there was a huge snowstorm, and because we got engaged February the 7th, and so we started to go down 51, and we can only go so far. And so he went over and was trying to go down 33, and we couldn't get very far. So we took this little 2-lane road where all we could see were there were no other cars that had been on the road, and they had reflectors, but the snow was just right up to almost to the reflectors. So that's the only way we could see that we were on the road. And we went all the way over to the turnpike, and we went home on the Turner Turnpike. And I remember at one point in time, we slid, and we slid off the road, and I mean, if we kept going, it wouldn't have been good, because it was like just a big drop off there. But we were able to get back on the road, but never once did we think, this isn't a good idea. We should turn around and go back to campus. We just, it probably took us, I think it took us like 4 hours to get to Tulsa. But we got home, and our parents were just not happy with us for driving home in that. But
And he was driving your car.
no, he had a car.
He traded his motorcycle for a car.
Yes. Well, this was before the motorcycle, because when we got married, he sold the car
Okay.
and bought a motorcycle, so we would have a car and a motorcycle. Okay. But his car was like a '68 Cutlass or something, and it had huge back tires, and it set up like this, and that's probably part of the reason why it slid all over the road.
Had you called them ahead of time and said, we're coming?
I don't know if we did or not.
They would have been patient.
Probably if we did, they would have told us not to come. Yeah. So I'm not sure that we did.
You're just going to surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
Well, did you get married in Stillwater, or did you in Tulsa?
We got married in Tulsa.
In Tulsa. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you graduated from here, UCO.
Yes.
UCO here. Roughly what year was that?
That was like 94.
Okay.
Because it was quite a bit, it was
You were a non-traditional student.
I was a non-traditional student
at that point.
But, that was a good experience too. My kids were in school full time, so I just went to classes while they were in school, and then I could pick them up after school, and then I just studied at night. So, but that was a good experience.
Did they go to OSU? Graduate?
They both went to OSU.
Okay.
And both of them had just wonderful experiences there. My youngest one, he graduated with a degree in film, and it was actually they didn't have it was like English with an emphasis in film. It was like film studies. That's what you had to do to get a film degree at that point. But I think they have a better maybe film major now. And then my oldest, both of them switched majors at some point during their, and my oldest, he wanted to, it was interesting, he wanted to major in music business. Well, they didn't have a music business degree. So what they did was they put a degree together for him. And this was even before they had the entrepreneurial school. And so he was going to be going through the College of Business, but he could take classes in music as well. And so he played electric bass in a band, and so he was going to play upright bass in the orchestra, in the symphony orchestra, and which this was going to be the first time he'd ever played an upright bass. And so after he'd been there a while, he said, you know what, I don't want to go through the College of Business. I want to go through the College of Arts and Sciences, because I want it to be more heavier in music than it is in business. And so he went to his low strings teacher, and it told him what he wanted to do. And so his teacher said, well, you understand that we don't have an electric bass major, so you'll have to jury into the music school if you want it to be music based. Mm-hmm. And so Ryan said, how do I do that? And so his professor said, well, I guess that I'll just have to up your lessons to twice a week, and then you can do the juries at the end of the year. And so the professor just gave him an extra lesson, didn't charge him any extra, but just gave him an extra lesson every week. And then Ryan said to him, but I want to know everything that you know about composers and everything. So how am I going to learn that? And so he said, well, I guess I will take you to lunch once a week, and you can ask me whatever you want. So he got an extra lesson every week, and he got to have lunch with the professor every week, and they just talked music and composers and everything. And Ryan just showed up all the time he showed up early to set up the music stands in the, when they played, and help however he could. And at the end of the year, he was able to jury into the music school. And the next year they gave him a music scholarship, and he was so thrilled, so.
Do you remember the professor's name? We'll give him a
Yes.
shout out.
Well, he's not there anymore,
Okay.
but he was in his 70s when he did it. But I won't ever forget his name was Dr. Evan Tonsing, and he was amazing, and he also did some amazing work with the Native Americans. So he was pretty well known for that. But just the fact that he was willing to take Ryan under his wing like he did was just, I was just so grateful and so impressed that he did that.
And do they have children? Either one?
Both of them are married and both of them have children. My oldest one, he worked in not-for-profit arts for quite a while. He worked for BMG Records, and then he ended up working for. He ended up managing movie theaters that were art house movies, and so he ended up in Chicago. He ended up being the managing director of the Chicago International Film Festival. And then he worked for the Arts Institute of Chicago. And then he finally decided, okay, I needed this, trying to raise money for not-for-profit arts I feel like I'm hitting my head against a wall. I got to do something else. So he came back to OSU IT. And at that time they had a watchmaking school. And he took the watchmaking course. They had a Rolex watchmaking school. He took the watchmaking course for 2 years, and he became a watchmaker for Rolex. And so he went to New York, and he worked in the department that where all Rolex watches are made in Switzerland. So they would send the watches to New York, and if a jeweler needed one that had a different colored face or something different done to it, then Ryan's department and his department would do that. So, and then they decided that they wanted him to become what they call a trainer, which is a trainer is somebody that goes around and trains Rolex salesmen. So they sent him to Dallas, and he flies out every week, and he flies all over the United States and trains Rolex salesmen, and he loves his job. But they let him. His wife is here in Tulsa, and she's a nurse, and so they let him base out of Tulsa since he's basically flying out, and he still goes to Rolex in Dallas. He still goes down there for meetings and stuff, but he can fly out of Tulsa. And she had 3 daughters when they got married, so he has 3 stepdaughters. So I inherited 3 granddaughters when he got married, and then Shane is the executive director for the Oregon Ballet, and he's in Portland. And he worked in theater, and then he got a job with the Oklahoma City Ballet as their executive director, and then he went to the Orlando Ballet, and then he went to a dance company in New York, and then now he's the head of the Oregon Ballet. And he and his wife are in Portland, and he also married someone who had 2 children, and I inherited children through that marriage. So I inherited 5 grandchildren through their marriages. So
some of them might come to OSU. Those 5, maybe.
In fact, Shane's oldest stepson just graduated from OSU. So
okay. Keeping it in the family.
Yeah, keeping it in the family.
Well, then they're getting to do some of what you wanted to do out of high school, go into theater and go to New York.
They did, yeah. In fact, Shane's wife is an actress, and so she did. Yeah, she did. She did some work in New York, and now she's trying to work into the theater scene in Portland.
I had never heard of the Rolex watch program at OSU.
Well, it was at OSU IT, and they have all kinds of technical. It's the technical arm of OSU, and they unfortunately they don't have the program there anymore, and I guess it was hard because it was in Okmulgee, and so kids didn't necessarily want to go to Okmulgee, and So what Ryan did is he went ahead and went and rented an apartment in Okmulgee, in downtown Okmulgee, and stayed right there because he didn't want to drive back and forth because we were living in Stillwater at the time, and he didn't want to drive back and forth to Okmulgee because that was that'd be kind of a long drive. So he said, it's not the greatest place to live, but he said, but I'm just, it was a very intensive program. You take 5 tests throughout the 2 years, and any time that you don't score a certain level on the test, you're out of the program. So he worked really hard for those 2 years.
Very specialized set of skills then. Wow. Okay.
So so we're very happy that we have that we're basically OSU alums, and that we have 2 OSU alums in the family as well.
And then
in our children, and then going to have grandchildren as well.
Yeah. That's cool. Maybe they all get to experience some P3s while they're on campus.
I hope so.
Or maybe they did if they graduated already. Maybe they did. Well, once, so Bella was in it like 2.5, 3 years.
I think she was in it for 2 years.
2 years. And then you chose not to do a second one.
No.
She wasn't ready. Shelby wasn't ready.
No, Shelby wasn't ready. I just knew that she wasn't going to be quite ready to do the things that I knew she needed to do in order to be successful. Now, I think at the age that she is now, if I went through the training now, I think maybe, possibly she could do it. But now, living in Edmond instead of Stillwater, I don't think that we would go back and do it. But it was a wonderful experience. It's probably one of my favorite things that I did on campus, and I'm really glad I got the opportunity to be a part of it.
Okay, before we close, then you need to tell us about Lady and the Tramp.
That's the nickname that Ann Hargis gave. Ann and I would pair up together pretty often because Shelby and Scruff did so well together, and so because Scruff at that time, you kind of never knew what was gonna happen with Scruff, so she nicknamed us Lady and the Tramp, and so of course she always thought Bella was the perfect little lady, and of course she called Scruff was the tramp, but Scruff was great with the kids. I mean, even though Scruff became their dog, and the story of them getting Scruff is because some kids had horribly shot him, and he was terribly injured, and so the OSU Vet Med Center, the kids found that some OSU students found him, took him to the Vet Med Center, and they were able to treat him, and he was completely healed, and so they were students there, and so they're like, we can't take him back to our dorm, and so I guess the Vet Med Center asked Burns and Ann if they would like to have Scruff, and they thought that well, I don't think Burns was quite sure, but Ann was. She was all in from the beginning. She was ready to have Scruff, and so I think at the beginning that was quite an undertaking because it took a little while, for Scruff to settle down, but Scruff has ended up being a wonderful dog, and he's a wonderful representative for P3, and when we would go out there together, he was great with the kids. Even though he could be a little wild and boisterous and everything, but he was, when the kids came around and they wanted to come pet him, whatever they wanted to do, he was fine with it.
And he could leave it and stay pretty good.
He could leave it and he could stay. Yeah, in the beginning we were like, oh, is he going to get through this or not? But we were all really proud of him. He did a great job, and and he and Bella were a great pair. So the little lady and the tramp did a good job together.
And you had the opportunity to work with Anne and Lorinda and several of the others during all
And
that.
Kendria, Kendria, because Sir Charles, and that now Kendria's got 2 dogs in the program. So, and both of them, they look kind of alike. So, and Disco is another dog that was in the program when I was. I don't know that I can remember all of them, but Shelby, Bella loved every single one of the dogs that were in the program. She just, now there was one dog that she didn't do really well with other dogs, and all the other dogs knew that, and of course the handler knew it. So she just kept her dog the way that you're really supposed to. Kept them, made sure that she kept the right distance away from the other dogs, and all the other dogs left that dog alone, and it was just absolutely perfectly fine because the dog was wonderful with kids. He just didn't want to be with other dogs, and that was fine. And Bella, boy, Bella just she would be with anybody. Dog didn't matter, person, cat, it didn't really matter. Just if somebody wanted to hang out with Bella, she was all up for it. She was, little Miss Social. So
had she been a rescue dog too, like Scruff?
No.
No.
Well, in a way, she the man that we got her from, that's who I got my first schnauzer from, and he called us and said, okay, so this dog is with the family next door, and they have 4 kids that are under the age of 6, and they just found out that they're having another one. And they told me I need to find a home for this dog because the dog is not getting enough attention. And he said, but I will tell you, it's the sweetest schnauzer I've ever seen. He said, in fact, my wife said, could we just give him our dog and take and the dog at the time was named Dottie because she had kind of a black dot on her nose. But I decided that Dottie was not an appropriate name for a schnauzer, maybe a Dalmatian, but she just didn't look like Dottie. And so when I got her, I just thought she just looked like the most beautiful little dog ever. And so I decided, Bella is the Italian word for beautiful, so I just decided that we were going to call her we're just going to call her beautiful. We were going to call her Bella, and that was just the perfect name for her.
And she was about how old at that time? Probably a couple of years?
Yeah.
A couple of years?
Yeah.
So are you Italian? Got some Italian blood in you?
I don't.
Okay.
I just
curious.
No, I don't. But I just knew that she just when I saw her, of course, Beauty and the Beast. Belle was in Beauty and the Beast, and so, but it wasn't. I didn't name her after that. That it became known at that point in time that Belle was the Italian name for beautiful, and I just thought, well, that is, that just is a perfect description of her. So,
and she responded. She didn't miss being called
Dottie. I was wondering, because I would, we just kept calling her Bella, and didn't take her long at all to respond to Bella. And then after a while, once I called her, I said Dottie, and she didn't even turn around. So she got so used to being called Bella that that she didn't even respond after a few years. I just thought, I wonder, if she will still respond to Dottie, but she didn't even pause when I called her Dottie. So,
well, when you were getting her ready to go do her thing for P3 and put it on her, did she know what the vest and
she absolutely did
what that meant?
Yep, she knew what the vest meant, because as soon as I got the vest out, she would start jumping around and she'd be ready to go get in the car because she knew we were going to campus and she was ready to go.
Wow. That's cool when they figure that out, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, she sounds like a very sweet dog.
She was.
Kayla, so looking back at all your OSU connections in time, do you have a couple of highlights? Just pop.
I would say, definitely just being a part of P3 was a highlight, and one of the highlights maybe for me was the Coaches versus Cancer birthday celebration with all of those kids, and in fact, taking Bella there, and one of the little boys was in a wheelchair, and so I had Bella was up on a chair, and so I just set her on a chair right next to him, so he could just pet her right there, and then all of a sudden he just got in right in her face, and then all of a sudden he just let out this big squeal, and it was like a scream, but he was happy, but it was really loud, and I knew, I could see that his dad just froze because he thought he wasn't sure how the dog was going to respond to that, and Bella, all of a sudden she looked at him, and then she just looked at me like, that was really loud, but she didn't jump, and she didn't, she did exactly what she was supposed to do. She didn't have any negative response to it, and I said, good girl,
She got 2 treats.
She got extra treats for that, and, just because some of the kids that were really sick, you don't quite know, because some of them are going to be a little rougher, but not purposely ever, but they were, she was just so patient and loving with them. It's I think the dogs just know that, that when kids need a little extra, it seems like, especially the P3 dogs, it's sort of like they kind of had a sense that, this was somebody that really needed, some extra love, and they were really good about being patient and wanting to give it, and so that was just a real highlight for me. And I think another highlight has to be being there when they announced, the completion of the $1 billion campaign. That was just so wonderful, exciting, just especially because it was Kirk and I's alma mater. So, and it's also, it Burns' alma mater. And, so all of us that worked on it, it was not just our job, it was our school. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to do that for our school, it was such a huge blessing. And Kirk and I rode in some of the homecoming parades, and that was kind of fun. I was like, I feel kind of weird that I'm waving to people, and they're probably like, "Who are those people?" But they put a sign on the car, so at least they would know who we were, so they wouldn't just think that we're just some odd couple, just
or friendly campus.
Yeah, exactly. But it was fun, and then probably for me other highlights, because I'm a huge sports fan, so being in New York when we made that basket and it sent us to the Final Four, and I was there, and that was hugely exciting for me, and it was kind of funny because my husband was not the huge sports fan that I was, so we would go to a Big 12 tournament in Kansas City every year, basketball tournament, and I would like to want to stay all day and watch all the teams play. And so he would take me down to the Sprint Center and drop me off, and he would go shopping. And
so the other way around.
And I would go to all the basketball games, and I would be sitting with the OSU people, and they would say, "Where's Kirk?" And I'd say, "He's shopping." And they go, "What? Wait a minute. You're at the basketball games and he's shopping. What's wrong with this picture?" And I'd say, "Absolutely nothing. That's just the way it is in my family." And the opportunity to go to so many of the bowl games, You know, those were wonderful experiences, and you know, the opportunity to meet so many alumni from all over the United States, and you know, find out the things that they've done and some of the amazing things that they've done, some of the things that they've accomplished is pretty exciting. And you know, and if people don't know the things that some of the OSU alumni have done, it's something that they should look into, because you know, we have some pretty outstanding alumni and the things that they've accomplished.
Not just Eddie Sutton and
Not just
and
Eddie
Mike
Sutton.
Bundy.
No, not just in you know, we have a guy that was in Hollywood, and he made masks, you know, for some great movies, and you know, and we've just things that they've accomplished in the medical field and in the oil business, and you know, all over the place, just things that they have, and people have gone all over the world to teach and to do things in different parts of the world, and it's so learning all those things has just been really wonderful as well.
Yes, I mean, it takes all of us it takes a village, and they've done well. I mean, I know a few of those things, but not all of them, and I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I can't think of his name. Mungle.
Yes.
Last name is
Yes,
Mungle.
Matt Mungle, I think, is his name.
Something like
Yes.
that.
Yeah, he is featured at the on one of the walls, I think, in the Alumni Center. So, and you know, building the Alumni Center over there, I mean, that is just, and oh my gosh, when we first started going, we just, you know, before Kirk even took the job there, you know, we would go to the football games, and they would invite us up to the suites, and it was just, you know, the suites, the way they were then compared to the way they are now. I mean, being able to attend the football games in the foundation suite. I mean, when we first walked up there and got to see what those looked like, I was just completely blown away. And you know, being able to host people up there, they would come up and they would say, "These are nicer than some of the pro football stadium suites that I've ever been to." So you know, that was a real honor and a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah, I guess when saying that, you guys were doing, or Kurt, you both were doing there when they were renovating some of that, all that.
Yes.
The stadium and the Gallagher, raising the roof.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Milestones in OSU history.
Yeah, and it was just it was gosh, just to see all the things that were done on campus. That was, you know, nothing could make me happier or prouder to see all the things that, you know, that are there on campus now.
And you had a tiny bit to do. You had
Yeah.
a big bit.
You know, I don't even know that I could say I had a tiny bit, but I was a cheerleader. If nothing else, I was a big cheerleader for it, you know.
Hey, that's a big part of it. Go Big Orange.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess go OSU, go Pokes. Go Pokes.
Yes, go Pokes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. I think that covers mine. Is there something I haven't thought to cover that we need to? I think from P3 didn't... Maybe we said this before. You said something about a fashion show.
Yes, there was a fashion show, and we had to get up and walk on the up on the stage, you know. And I was not sure that she was going to walk with me and turn and walk, you know. But fortunately, we made it through that one. You know, I was afraid that we'd be like halfway through and she might see food on the table or something, and we may be off the table and sitting next to somebody waiting for a treat. But fortunately, she got to go forward and back and off the stage, and
would she have something on? Or was
she just had on her little vest.
Okay.
And you know, they did the fashions, and then we paraded the dogs.
Okay.
So, but I remember that Pistol Pete was there, and I got a picture of her, and I thought, I'm going to try this. And so I asked Pete if he would hold her, and I wasn't sure how she was going to respond to that, with that big 45-pound head. And she just, she was absolutely fine, in Pistol Pete's arms. And so I got a really cute picture of Bella in Pistol Pete's arms with her little vest on, so that was cute.
Did the other dogs mind him?
I don't think they came anywhere near him.
That would be intimidating. Yeah, you couldn't see the mouth move or anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's a good memory too. Yeah,
and I think the other thing that was, I don't remember if we got to take the dogs up. I think we did. At some point, they got to take the dogs to see some of the cancer patients, and I know that when we went up there with the teams, some of the times I would go just as a volunteer without dogs, and in my job, a lot of times I would be Pistol Pete's handler, and so I would walk with him and just be sure I tell him to duck at certain points in times, because some of the signs in the hallways were lower than the top of his hat. So
especially the exit signs, I guess.
Yes, so I had to watch carefully to make sure he didn't get his head, knocked off.
So and in 2015 with the parade accident, you were already.
Yeah, I was already finished
out of the program
at that time. Yes, that was a really sad time, and also, the plane crash was a really difficult time for us, because one of the guys that we lost in the plane crash was Bill Tiggins from Channel 9, and he and Kirk, my husband, were good friends in high school, and so they've known each other since high school, and they used to go to lunch together, about once a month, because Bill, he was an OSU grad, he was an alum, and so we got to see him a lot more because he would come up to campus for a lot of things, and Channel 5 had Dean Blevins, and Dean Blevins was OU guy through and through, but Channel 9 had Bill, and and Bill, of course, he like Dean, he would that they talk about both teams, but Dean's heart was at OU and Bill's heart was at OSU, so that was kind of nice.
So you missed him during all that.
Yes, yeah, that was a really tough thing to go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've interviewed his daughter. Yeah, I think what I remember from that interview, well, one of the things is that he liked chocolate pie from Johnny's.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Simple things like that.
Yes.
Gives us character.
Well, and see, Kirk graduated from Nathan Hale, and I graduated from East Central. And so Bill's wife graduated from East Central. So I knew Janice, his wife, from East Central, and Kirk had, so sometimes, when the four of us were in the same room together, I would know Bill, but I knew Janice too. So that was, and we still see Janice from time to time.
Good connections.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, anything else? Can't think of anything else we need to cover?
I don't think so. It's just my years at OSU were just such a blessing, and and I think the biggest part of the blessing was Pete's Pet Posse, and I'm thrilled that it's continued to be such a successful program, and I hope it continues throughout the future. But I just see it getting bigger and better, and it makes me happy because I think it makes the kids happy.
See, now it has its own location now. There for a while it was wherever, but now it's in the student union with its own. The Ann Hargis OSU Center for Pet Therapy as of 2021. So that came a little bit after you.
Yeah, it did.
But that's a sign in the right direction.
It is. It is.
Yeah, it's been quite a success. Now they have Rough Riders with students' involvement, help the handlers out. So that's grown too. So.
It has, yeah. It's just continued to grow, and they have their baccalaureate, every year, and they, I was fortunate they came up with that idea the very first year. So Bella got to go through baccalaureate, so that was fun. That was a fun memory.
She had to walk across the stage for that too.
She did, but of course I had the treat nearby, so that so she knew something was coming.
Yeah. So, and that was 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Well, roughly 20. Well, it would have been 2013.
Yeah, the first year.
So 10 years. 10 years. I guess at that point you guys had no clue it would be still around in 10 years.
Absolutely not.
Just hopeful that it would be.
And for sure we didn't know that it was going to become what it is now and be on every campus. So we just couldn't be happier.
We'll see what happens in the next 10.
I can't wait.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing today. It's been
Absolutely.
great.